Chosen one. Pause. Heaven has interrupted your scroll for a reason. You are not here by coincidence. The Spirit has pressed pause on time itself to reach you because something dangerous is approaching your life. It looks harmless, but it carries the breath of spiritual death. Listen carefully. You've been sensing a pull inside you between what feels easy and what feels right, between delay and destiny. That restlessness isn't confusion, it's a divine alert. You have been marked for purpose, and because you are chosen, darkness studies you, waiting for that moment of weariness when compromise starts to sound logical. But heaven speaks clearly now. Don't do it. The world will tell you that bending your convictions just once is harmless. But you've seen what happens when the chosen exchange their calling for comfort. They fade slowly, not with an explosion, but with a quiet flicker. Like a lamp losing oil, the flame still glows, but it weakens. Maybe you've been here before. You've felt that whisper in your mind. It's not a big deal, yet something deep in your chest tightens, warning you not to move. That's not fear, it's the Holy Spirit defending your destiny. The Word of God declares in the book of Proverbs, chapter 14, verse 12, "There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death." That's the core of this moment. What seems right can still lead to ruin. The offer that feels peaceful may actually silence your purpose. The opportunity that shines too quickly might drain your anointing. The enemy never shows you the cost, only the comfort. You prayed for direction, and this message is your answer. Heaven says, pause before you act. What appears as progress might actually be a pit. Picture this. A ship glides across calm waters. The captain checks his compass, sees a slight shift, and ignores it. Hours later, he's miles off course. The difference began with a single degree of neglect. That's how spiritual death begins, not in rebellion, but in small disobedience. I know you're tired of waiting. You've been asking, when? God? You've served. You've prayed. And it feels like heaven is silent. But sometimes, the silence isn't absence, it's shelter. The delay isn't rejection, it's construction. God is not holding you back. He's holding you together. Let me tell you about one who walked this same road. There was a young man named Daniel, hidden in a foreign land. Everyone around him bowed to pressure. One decision, one meal offered to idols could have made his life easier. Yet Daniel said no. He didn't shout. He didn't fight. He simply refused to compromise. That single act preserved his destiny. While others feasted, he fasted, and heaven recorded his name for eternity. You are standing in your Daniel moment now. The temptation might wear the mask of opportunity, but if it asks you to dim your light, to betray your conviction, it's not from God. You know it in your spirit. The peace isn't there. The spiritual death is quiet. It doesn't arrive with noise, but with numbness. You begin to justify what you once resisted. You stop fighting for what's holy. You call apathy maturity. But you were not born to blend in with lukewarm faith. You were created to carry fire. So, take this breath. The very fact that you're still hearing these words means grace hasn't left you. Mercy is still at your door. Don't surrender your oil for approval. Don't sell your birthright for comfort. The crown waiting for you is too precious to trade for temporary ease. Tonight, take one act of faith Type 777 inches the comments. Let heaven see your agreement. It's a prophetic declaration that says, I choose life. I choose obedience. I choose to wait for what's real. If this message stirred your heart, share it, like it, and subscribe so that this voice of light can reach another chosen one standing on the same edge between purpose and danger. One simple act of sharing can become the bridge that saves a soul. You are not being punished. You are being preserved. The pause is not death, it's discipline. When peace returns, move with it. Until then, stay still in the presence that guards you. Heaven is watching. Angels are recording. Don't step off the path for something that glitters. Wait for the glory that grows. Type 777. Below, if you understand. Heaven will see. You have no idea how close you were to danger. But grace covered you again. Stand firm. Your no today is building the foundation for your yes tomorrow. Heaven rejoices over your restraint. Keep your flame guarded. This is the moment your strength begins to return. You wake the next morning with a strange stillness in your chest. The warning from heaven still echoes quietly. Not as fear, but as awareness. The choice you almost made keeps replaying in your thoughts. You realize now how subtle it was, how easily one compromise could have disguised itself as peace. That's the danger of spiritual traps. They rarely announce themselves. They whisper. You start to notice how this pattern has followed you every time you approach a breakthrough. Something small appears. A distraction. An invitation. A chance to bend your values just slightly. The enemy doesn't need you to fall in a moment. He just needs you to drift 1 degree off course. Slowly. Consistently. He tries to weaken your conviction until obedience feels optional. This is the subtle trap. It rarely begins with rebellion. It begins with fatigue. A voice tells you, you've been strong long enough. Take a break. You deserve this. But what looks like rest can sometimes be a rehearsal for surrender. That's why discernment is more precious than gold. It doesn't only protect your decisions, it protects your destiny. There's an old story about a farmer who owned 2 fields. One was wide, open, and easy to plow. The other was narrow, filled with stones, and demanded more effort. When the harvest came, the easy field produced weeds, but the hard field produced wheat. The lesson was simple. The harder path often holds the holier reward. Chosen one. That's where you are now. The harder path may not look beautiful, but it's blessed. The quiet resistance you show today is building spiritual muscle. Heaven sees every moment you choose, restraint over reaction, silence over bitterness, obedience over impulse. You've probably noticed how temptation always comes, dressed in familiarity. It never appears as something foreign, it imitates what you once loved. That's how it gains your attention. The serpent in Eden didn't roar, it reasoned. It spoke language that felt safe, logical, appealing. Eve wasn't seduced by rebellion, she was deceived by reasoning. The enemy uses half-truths to birth full destruction. As the prophet wrote in the scroll of Hosea, chapter 4, verse 6, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." Lack of knowledge isn't ignorance, it's neglect. It's knowing what is right, but convincing yourself it can wait. You've been equipped with the truth, but the battle lies in remembering it when the lie feels more convenient. There's a moment you recall, a time when you gave in to something that seemed harmless. You told yourself it was temporary, but it left a mark, didn't it? That mark wasn't shame, it was mercy. Heaven's way of reminding you how delicate your calling is. Every time you touch fire, it leaves a memory, and that memory becomes your teacher. Now you see it clearly. The trap was never about the action itself. It was about your alignment. The enemy isn't trying to take your possessions. He's after your position. If he can move your heart 1 inch away from the will of God, everything else eventually follows. So, guard your mind like a fortress. When doubt knocks, answer it with truth. When pressure builds, breathe before you act. The spirit inside you is not weak. It's a lion resting, not a lamb retreating. Every temptation resisted is a roar released into eternity. Let this moment become a lesson, not a wound. When you sense that subtle whisper urging you to choose ease over endurance, remember this: compromise will always promise relief but deliver emptiness. Patience may stretch you, but it strengthens what compromise would destroy. Sometimes the holiest thing you can do is simply not move yet. Waiting feels heavy, but waiting with obedience is warfare. Each quiet refusal you make becomes another brick in the wall of your protection. Heaven builds with your silence as much as with your speech. And when you look back, you'll see it, the pattern of grace. The same God who warned you yesterday is still guarding you today. Every delay, every closed door, every gentle no was not rejection, but redirection. He was steering you away from false peace and toward lasting purpose. There is power in awareness. You don't need to fear the trap when you can recognize its design. Darkness cannot deceive those who have learned to listen to light. You are learning. You are maturing. You are slowly mastering the art of standing still when everything around you demands reaction. That is not weakness, it's wisdom. So breathe again. Let peace settle where panic once lived. The test was never about your strength, it was about your sight. And today, your eyes see clearer than before. You've begun to see it now, the way comfort can turn into quiet captivity. The most dangerous moments for a chosen one are not the storms, but the seasons of still water, when everything seems calm. Your guard drops. You confuse rest with retreat, peace with passivity, waiting with wasting. That's how the cage closes silently, gently, with golden bars. You prayed for relief, and God gave it. But now, the same peace He granted is testing your hunger. Do you still chase Him when you no longer need rescue? Do you still burn when the fire no longer hurts? Comfort has a melody. It hums softly until your passion falls asleep to its rhythm. It doesn't start with rebellion. It starts with rest that goes too far. One day you wake up and prayer feels optional. The word feels heavy. The urgency that once lived in your chest feels like a faint memory. That's the quiet death when you stop noticing the absence of fire. The ancient words in Revelation, chapter 3, verse 15, remind you, I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish you were one or the other. This verse isn't condemnation, it's a pulse check. It's God saying, I still see your spark, but it's time to fan it. He would rather see you wrestle than settle, rather see you cry in pursuit than smile in apathy. There was once a young woman named Mara who served faithfully for years. When her long-awaited season of blessing arrived, she exhaled. Finally, No more trials. She stopped fasting. She prayed less. She thought the silence was peace. But it was distance. The flame that once terrified darkness now flickered weakly, unnoticed. Months later, she whispered through tears, "God, I miss you." And heaven whispered back, "Then move again." End of 2. That's what comfort steals the movement of your spirit. It doesn't destroy your faith, it dulls it. You start surviving on memories of old encounters instead of seeking new ones. The miracle stories you tell belong to your past, not your present. You were not created for survival mode. You were made for divine momentum. Every time you delay obedience, your spirit stiffens a little more. The enemy doesn't need you to sin just to settle. A quiet believer is easier to contain than a broken one who keeps burning. Chosen one. It's time to shake the dust off your soul. Your purpose is still pulsing beneath the layers of delay. The Spirit hasn't left. He's just waiting for your invitation to move again. There's a sound heaven loves to hear, the sound of a heart waking up. It's quiet at first, like footsteps returning to an altar. Then it grows. You feel it in your chest. Now, don't you? That stirring isn't guilt. It's revival knocking from within. Right here. Take a moment to make it tangible. In the comments, write, "Light my soul." And when you type it, don't do it mechanically. Whisper it as a prayer. See it as a spark, one small act that tells heaven, "I'm not done. I still want you." Every word you release becomes a flicker in the unseen, and flickers become flames. You've rested enough. The season of stillness has served its purpose. Now, rise. Let the embers breathe again. The cage you thought was locked is already open. You only needed to remember who you are, a flame born to move. The Spirit waits. The fire is near. Step back into the light that never stopped calling your name. You may not realize it yet, but this awakening is already happening. The stirring in your heart is not emotion, it's alignment. Heaven is tuning you back to your original frequency. The one you carried before the world tired you out. That small ache for more is proof that your fire is not gone, only hidden beneath the ashes of routine. It only takes one breath of surrender to bring it back. Every revival starts privately. Before nations hear it, one person feels it. Before miracles are seen, a single soul whispers, "Use me again." That whisper is forming in you now. It doesn't need applause or confirmation. It only needs honesty. If you can admit, "God, I've drifted, but I want to return," then you've already taken the first step toward restoration. You don't have to chase old versions of yourself. You're not called to repeat the past. You're called to rise from it. What burned before was real, but what's coming will be stronger. Because this time, your fire won't come from emotion, it will come from revelation. You've tasted what silence feels like, and now you'll protect your flame differently. Stand still for a moment and feel it, the gentle pull of purpose returning to its rightful place. Heaven isn't asking for perfection, only participation. The moment you say yes again, the wind will meet the ember, and just like that, what was dim becomes unstoppable light. There is an intelligence to darkness. It studies, waits, and observes your rhythm. It learns the moments when your guard is down, the nights when fatigue silences your prayer, the mornings when disappointment lingers longer than usual. That's when it begins its plan, not through chaos, but through distraction. The enemy's strategy has always been subtle. He doesn't rush you to destruction. He simply diverts your attention. He knows that if he can occupy your focus, he can weaken your faith. You start to chase answers instead of intimacy, results instead of relationship. You still believe in God, but your eyes are elsewhere. You scroll more than you seek. You react more than you reflect. You plan more than you pray. Slowly, heaven's voice becomes an echo behind the noise of everything urgent. You've probably felt it, the quiet drift. You tell yourself you're just busy. You'll pray later. You'll read tomorrow. You'll rest this weekend. But days become weeks, and weeks become numbness. The detour doesn't feel like rebellion. It feels like responsibility. That's the deception. It was proclaimed in the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 11, verse 14. For Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. In quote, he doesn't show up with horns. He arrives as opportunity, as logic, as what looks like answered prayer but carries a twist. He comes disguised as comfort that keeps you from growth, as relationships that drain you while pretending to support you, as voices that sound wise but steer you away from truth. Think about it. When Jesus was tempted in the wilderness, the devil quoted scripture, not Lee's scripture. That's how clever distraction can be. It doesn't deny truth, it distorts it. It wraps rebellion in reason. It offers shortcuts that feel spiritual, but skip obedience. The most effective detours don't destroy your faith, they dilute it. You keep enough light to feel righteous, but not enough to stay radiant. You're still moving, but in circles. You're still worshipping, but without wonder. The motions remain, but the meaning fades. There's a story of a man who worked as a watchmaker. Every morning he would pass a large clock tower and adjust his pocket watch according to its time. One day, he met the caretaker of the tower and mentioned this habit. The caretaker smiled and said, "That's funny. I set the tower clock by the factory whistle that goes off at noon." Both men thought they were aligned, yet both were off. That's what happens when your reference point is other people's rhythm instead of God's voice. You've been glancing at others at their pace, their blessing, their breakthrough, and measuring your own timing against theirs. But comparison is one of the enemy's favorite distractions. It breeds both pride and pity, either of which can pull you from purpose. When you chase another's calling, you abandon your own. Chosen one. Understand this. Your pace is not behind, it's divine. The delay in your journey is not failure, it's filtration. God slows you down to protect your purity. He hides you not because you're unworthy, but because your anointing requires incubation. What seems like silence is heaven's safeguard against contamination. Distraction often appears when destiny draws near. When you are closest to breakthrough, noise increases. Every opinion, every temptation, every unnecessary urgency flares up at once. It's a spiritual smokescreen meant to keep you from seeing how close you really are. You can test any voice by its fruit. The voice of God brings clarity, even in correction. The voice of darkness brings confusion, even when it sounds reasonable. Peace is always the signature of heaven. If you have to force it, it's not divine. So, return your attention. Look back at the last time you truly felt His presence. What changed since then? Which habit grew louder than your hunger? You don't need to condemn yourself for drifting. You only need to realign. Awareness is the first act of warfare. You are not powerless in this. You've been given the mind of Christ, the discernment of the Spirit, and the authority of obedience. Every time you choose focus over noise, you silence 1,000 lies. Distraction cannot dominate a disciplined heart. You fight not by shouting at the darkness, but by refusing to follow it. The enemy's entire plan crumbles when you decide to guard your gaze. That simple choice to look at God again undoes everything hell designed against you. So tonight, when the noise rises and your thoughts scatter, whisper this quietly to yourself: I return my focus. That single sentence can break the spell of distraction, because where your attention goes, your anointing flows. The plan of darkness fails the moment you choose to see clearly. There comes a moment, chosen one, when the voice of conviction turns into invitation. You've heard the warnings, felt the pull, and learned to guard your focus. But now, heaven shifts the message from protecting your flame to pouring it out. Because light that only burns for itself eventually dims. Flame survives by giving. You see, God never designed your journey to be lived in isolation. The anointing that rests on you is not a private possession. It's a torch meant to ignite others. When you share, when you speak, when you give even a small portion of what you have, you multiply the light. That's how heaven's economy works. Generosity fuels fire. There's a story about a traveler who carried a single candle through a dark forest. Halfway through, he found others stranded, afraid to move. Instead of hoarding his small flame, he tore bits of cloth, wrapped them around sticks, and shared his fire. When morning came, the forest was filled with hundreds of small lights. He had started with one, but because he shared, none of them were left in darkness. That's what happens when you pour out what you carry. Every like, every share, every word spoken in faith becomes another spark that lights someone's path. You may not see it, but somewhere a weary soul scrolls through the night, searching for hope, and your act of faith becomes the hand that guides them back. According to the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 16, let your light so shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Your light doesn't have to be loud. It only has to be real. When you engage, when you spread truth, when you stand with messages like this one, you're not promoting a channel, you're participating in a mission. Every click becomes a ripple, every share, a seed, every act of support, a candle handed to someone still lost in the dark. Maybe you've been wondering if your small contribution even matters. It does. Just as one drop of water can mirror the entire sky, your single act of generosity carries the reflection of heaven itself. There is no small giving when it's done in love. If these words have touched your spirit, take a moment, press like, to keep this flame alive. Share, so the light travels farther. And subscribe to walk beside this growing circle of fire. None of this is demanded, it's an open hand. It's like adding another log to a bonfire. Each piece keeps the warmth spreading through the night. And if you ever feel led to do more to sustain this flow of messages that keep the lamps burning across the world, you can sow a seed, a small donation, as oil poured into the lamp of the lighthouse, not out of obligation, but gratitude. When you give, you are not buying favor. You are fueling the flame that already blessed you. Imagine a lighthouse standing on the edge of a restless sea. Its light stretches far, cutting through fog and waves. But even the strongest lighthouse needs oil to keep burning. Your giving, your share, your time, your prayer becomes that oil. Without it, the flame flickers. With it, the light never stops, guiding ships home. And maybe, one day, someone who finds hope through your small act of generosity will pass it forward, lighting another soul in darkness. That's how heaven multiplies goodness through hearts that give because they want to, not because they must. So, if your heart feels moved, respond in whatever form feels right. Maybe it's sharing this message so it reaches someone scrolling in silence. Maybe it's subscribing so you remain part of this living stream of light. Or maybe it's offering a seed, the gentle kind that grows unseen but feeds many. Whatever you choose, do it freely, joyfully, knowing your act keeps the fire alive. You're not a spectator, you're a keeper of light. Each time you participate, you whisper to heaven, "Let there be more light." Let, and there will be. And when the giving is done in silence, heaven still notices. The unseen generosity becomes music in the spirit, an offering that hums softly in eternity. Every act, no matter how small, writes a note in the song of light that never stops playing. That is how heaven counts value, not by size, but by sincerity. You may never meet the lives you touch. You may never know the stories that change because of your single act, but eternity records it all. Somewhere, your kindness becomes a lantern in someone's longest night. So keep walking. Flame bearer, keep your heart open, your hands ready, and your spirit generous. The light you sustain today will one day lead you home, glowing brighter with every step. You feel it again, that pull between obedience and impulse. The air around your spirit is shifting, and you can sense that a decision is near. It may not look like a grand moment, but heaven is watching closely, because sometimes one clear choice carries eternal weight. You've stood faithfully, resisted distraction, guarded your flame. But there's one more moment, one more test. The choice that decides whether the light inside you grows or fades. It's subtle, almost invisible. That's why heaven sends this message now, to warn and to protect. There is something you are being tempted to do. Maybe it's to walk away from something sacred. Maybe it's to return to what you've already been delivered from. Or maybe it's simply to act before peace says, move. It looks right, it feels logical, but deep in your chest, the spirit whispers, wait, Lonen. You've heard that whisper before. The sound of mercy stopping you at the edge. Every time you obeyed that voice, grace covered you. Every time you ignored it, something within dimmed. You remember those nights when peace slipped away, when prayer felt hollow. That was never punishment. It was the echo of warning. The prophet Elijah spoke, as recorded in the first book of Kings, chapter 18, verse 21. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. Then, that's the tension right now. You stand between two choices, the easy and the eternal. The one that soothes your flesh, or the one that strengthens your faith. The moment before the fall is never dramatic, it's quiet. It begins with hesitation. Hesitation becomes curiosity. And curiosity opens the door to compromise. I once heard a story about a shepherd who noticed a gap in his fence. It was small, hardly noticeable, just enough for one sheep to squeeze through. He planned to fix it tomorrow. But before the next sunrise, a storm came. The sheep wandered through the gap and vanished into the valley. That's how disobedience begins, not with rebellion, but with postponement. Chosen one. You have come too far to drift now. You've fought too many battles, endured too many lonely seasons, to lose everything to a moment of impulse. Don't let emotion decide what eternity will have to correct. The action you're considering may seem small, but its roots are deep. Heaven is saying, stop. Now, if peace doesn't stand beside the decision, do not move. The Spirit will never rush you, only fear does that. God's timing carries rest, not pressure. When you act in His will, even waiting feels like progress. When you act outside of it, even success feels empty. Maybe this is your moment of rescue, the second before the storm, when heaven steps in and says, don't take that step. You don't need more confirmation. The pause in your soul is the confirmation. That's how God speaks when words are too heavy. Let me paint an image for you. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff covered in mist. Below, the drop is hidden by clouds. A voice from behind you says, wet. Don't step forward yet. But curiosity tempts you to lean in. That's the danger, the unknown wrapped in fascination. What you cannot see is what grace is shielding you from. You are being tested not in strength, but in surrender. The true measure of obedience isn't how loud you say yes, but how faithfully you can say, not yet. Patience is the highest form of trust. Right now, take a breath. Lay down the plan you're forming, the message you're about to send, the step you're about to take. Let heaven reorder it. You will not lose what's meant for you by waiting. You will only lose it by rushing. This message reaches you at the perfect second because heaven knows what's next. God is not trying to restrict you. He's rescuing you from the storm ahead. So pause, think, pray, and when your spirit settles, mark this moment. It's the sound of divine mercy covering you once more. As a prophetic sign, type 555 below. This isn't a superstition, it's a declaration. 5 is the number of grace. And when it comes threefold, it speaks of grace upon grace. The kind that steps between you and danger. When you type 555, you're not sending numbers into a void. You're building an altar in words, saying, I will not move until peace walks beside me. Let that comment become your covenant. It's your way of telling heaven, I have heard. I will wait. I choose light over impulse. Each person who types it adds another stone to the wall of obedience that guards the faithful. Heaven sees. Angels record. The storm pauses. And the moment you choose stillness over haste, destiny breathes again. The air feels different after obedience. It's quieter, not empty, but sacredly still. That's what mercy sounds like when it lingers. You didn't realize it before, but every time you paused instead of acting, something unseen shifted. Heaven calls that mercy's final knock, the gentle moment before consequences harden into chains. You see, grace doesn't chase forever. It calls, it waits, it whispers. But there comes a point when silence replaces warning, not out of anger, but out of sorrow. Mercy is patient, but it is not endless. It stands at your door again and again. asking for entrance, until your answer decides whether it remains or withdraws. You've felt that knocking before, haven't you? The quiet tug in your spirit, the heaviness that sits in your chest after a choice you knew wasn't right. That's not guilt, that's mercy trying to turn you before the edge. Every ache in your conscience is evidence that heaven hasn't given up on you yet. The Spirit spoke through the prophet Jeremiah. Chapter 7, verse 23. Obey my voice, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people. Walk in all the ways that I have commanded you, that it may be well with you. That verse isn't a command meant to control. It's a plea from a father who knows what happens when his children walk away. Obedience isn't about rules, it's about protection. Each boundary God sets is a fence around your peace. Mercy's final knock always comes before collapse. It shows up as conviction during the conversation you know you shouldn't have started. It interrupts your sleep the night before a decision you know you shouldn't make. It speaks through a message like this one, arriving exactly when your heart starts to justify something small but dangerous. The frightening part is how normal the danger feels. The path to spiritual death never looks like rebellion, it looks like relief. It looks like the thing you've wanted finally coming together. Even though peace is absent, mercy tries to warn you. But the noise of desire often drowns it out. There was a man once, gifted and chosen. He heard the same whispers of mercy many times, each one softer than the last. Every time he ignored it, he told himself he would return later. He thought conviction was permanent. He thought God would always interrupt. But one day, the silence came, not because God stopped loving him, but because God honors the freedom of his children. Mercy cannot stay where it is refused. You don't want that silence. Chosen one, you want the voice. You want the presence. You want the gentle correction that still keeps you safe. The pain you sometimes feel when conviction pierces your heart, that's proof you're still alive spiritually. When your spirit aches, it's not punishment, it's preservation. Mercy's final knock is tender. It doesn't demand, it invites. It's the patient hand of God tapping on the walls of your heart, saying, don't let the moment pass without answering. You don't have to fix everything at once. You just have to open the door. You might wonder why God warns so often before allowing consequence. It's because love always gives space for change. Divine justice never arrives without divine mercy, first laying the groundwork for repentance. The warning is not rejection, it's invitation. There's an image that often returns to me, a lantern swaying in a long hallway. Its flame barely holding on, the air around it trembles, as if one more gust could extinguish it. That's what your spirit looks like when mercy stands nearby. The flame flickers, but the light remains. All it takes is one breath, one turn. One, yes, to steady it again. So if you hear the knocking now, don't rush past it. Let it linger. Sit in the stillness. Every second you remain in awareness becomes an act of surrender. You don't need words, you just need willingness. God hears even the prayers that never leave your lips. Mercy is still near. The door is still open. You haven't gone too far. You've simply wandered too long. But even now, heaven is reaching, hand extended, saying, come back before the silence. The truth is, mercy doesn't end when grace fades. It transforms. It becomes a memory that either haunts or heals. Depending on your response, you decide which The voice that once called you softly can either become your comfort or your echo. Right now, mercy is speaking in the gentlest way possible through remembrance. The moments you're recalling, the people you've hurt, the prayers you've avoided, each one is a knock. Don't be afraid of it. That's not shame, it's awakening. And if you listen closely, beneath the hum of the world, you'll hear it again, that soft rhythm against your heart. Knock. Pause. Knock. It's heaven. Once more. Asking for entry. You still have time to answer. You still have time to open the door before silence arrives. There's something sacred about understanding what happens when a soul begins to drift. It doesn't happen suddenly. It's a quiet fading. Like twilight slipping over a city that once blazed with light. The danger isn't the darkness itself, it's how comfortable you become in it. That's the process of spiritual death. It starts in the small corners of your heart, where compromise goes unnoticed. At first, you still speak the same words, pray the same prayers, even attend the same places. But something underneath starts to change. The prayers grow shorter. The worship feels heavier. You no longer sense the same fire you once carried. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that emotions fade, that this is maturity. But somewhere deep down, you know it's not peace, it's distance. The hardest part about spiritual death is that it feels peaceful at first. Silence replaces conviction, and you mistake the absence of guilt for the presence of grace. But silence without presence is not peace, it's withdrawal. It's like standing in an empty house that still smells faintly of home, but no longer holds the warmth of living souls. We are reminded through the writings of David in the book of Psalms, chapter 51, verse 12, "Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me with a willing spirit." David wrote that after realizing he had drifted far from God, his prayer wasn't only for forgiveness, it was for restoration of joy. That's what spiritual death steals first, not your belief, but your joy. You keep functioning, but you stop feeling. You still know truth, but it no longer burns within you. You begin to tolerate what you once trembled before. You begin to justify what you once rejected. Conviction turns into memory, and memory becomes nostalgia. And one day, you wake up and realize you are walking, talking, and living, but not burning. That's spiritual death, when motion remains, but meaning disappears. There's a story about a violinist who played in the same theater every night for years. One evening, the string of his violin snapped during the performance. Instead of stopping, he kept playing on 3 strings. The audience marveled at his resilience, but what they didn't see was that his song had lost its fullness. It was still music, but no longer melody. That's what it's like when your spirit plays without the presence of God, functional, but fractured. The enemy doesn't want you to abandon God outright. He just wants you to get used to living without his fire. He wants you to grow comfortable with emptiness. Because once you accept spiritual numbness as normal, you stop seeking revival. But here's the hidden beauty. Even spiritual death is not final when mercy intervenes. The moment you recognize the emptiness, the very act of noticing it becomes resurrection, beginning. Awareness is the breath that wakes what has fallen asleep. When you whisper, "Something's missing," heaven hears it as a signal to move. It's strange how God works in decline. Even when you drift, he leaves small signs, a verse that suddenly pierces you, a song that stirs memories, a message that finds you at midnight. These are the sparks scattered along your path, leading you back to life. You might think you've gone too far, but the fact that you still feel the ache is proof you haven't. A truly dead spirit feels nothing. That ache in your heart, that unease in your silence, that quiet longing for something more, those are signs of life stirring again. When the heart begins to revive, it doesn't do so with noise. It starts with small pulses, moments of awareness, whispers of hunger, fragments of memory. That's how resurrection begins. The soul that was once grey starts to glow faintly. The prayers that once felt forced begin to breathe again. The same scriptures that once felt distant now sound like promises. This is the mercy of God. He doesn't just forgive what has died, He resurrects it. So, if you find yourself here in the space between emptiness and awakening, don't be afraid. Don't hide from the silence. Listen through it. The very stillness that frightened you is becoming the soil where new life will grow. Spiritual death is not the end. It's an invitation to resurrection. When you recognize the decay, you create room for renewal. God doesn't need your perfection. He only needs your permission. And once He has that, He breathes again softly at first, then fiercely, until your soul burns brighter than it ever did before. There's a weight that settles over the heart when heaven grows silent. Not the kind that crushes, but the kind that reminds you something is missing. Silence from God is one of the deepest mysteries of faith. It doesn't mean abandonment. It often means examination. When the Spirit stops speaking, it's not because He's gone, it's because He's waiting. At first, the stillness feels unbearable. You pray, but the words fall like stones. You read, but the pages seem blank. You worship, but it feels like the ceiling swallowed your song. You start to ask, where are you? And though you can't hear Him, you somehow know He's near, like a father watching his child learn to walk from a distance, giving space so strength can grow. That's how the silence of the Spirit works. It doesn't come to destroy you, it comes to deepen you. It's the test between your love for His voice and your loyalty to His presence. Because if you can only believe when you can feel Him, your faith depends on emotion. But when you can still believe, even in the quiet, your faith becomes foundation. The ancient words recorded in the book of Job, chapter 23, verse 10. Declare, but He knows the way that I take. When He has tested me, I will come forth as gold. That verse holds the secret to silence. When God hides, He's refining. When He withdraws, He's purifying. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. There was once a chosen one named Elias, known for his powerful prayers. He would speak, and heaven would answer with signs. But one season, everything stopped. The same prayers that once opened the heavens now met only still air. Felt abandoned. He shouted, wept, questioned. Days turned into months. Yet one night, as he sat in silence, he finally realized the test was not whether God would speak, but whether He would still listen. And that's when it happened. Not a voice, not thunder, just a soft warmth rising in his chest. The same presence that had seemed distant was right there all along, teaching him to recognize peace without sound. Chosen one. Maybe that's your season right now. The silence isn't proof that God left. It's proof that He trusts you to walk without constant reminders. A mature spirit learns to interpret silence as instruction. God doesn't always repeat himself sometimes. He watches to see if you still obey the last thing he said. Think of a teacher in a classroom. During the lesson, the teacher speaks constantly, guiding every step. But during the test, the teacher is silent, not absent, just observing. You are in that test. The silence means the lesson has already been given. Now heaven is waiting to see your response. Silence also reveals what noise once covered. In the quiet, your real motives surface, your hidden fears, your unspoken doubts, your true dependencies all become visible. It's uncomfortable, but it's sacred, because God never exposes to embarrass, he exposes to heal. The silence of the Spirit is not the absence of love, it's its highest form. Love trusts. Love allows space. Love knows that distance can deepen devotion. If you can still worship through silence, you've reached a level of intimacy beyond words. That's where your faith stops needing evidence and starts becoming essence. Right now, take a breath and let the quiet teach you. Don't rush to fill it. Just sit in it. The peace that follows will tell you more than words ever could. And when your heart is ready, type, speak again. Not as a demand, but as a prayer. Let it be your way of telling heaven, I'm still listening. Even if you whisper, I will hear. Those two words, simple, pure, surrendered, are an offering. Write it gently, not out of frustration but faith, because the moment your spirit humbles itself to say, speak again, the silence begins to shift. You may not hear thunder, but you'll feel alignment. That's when the silence ends, not with sound, but with understanding. And when understanding comes, it doesn't arrive as a shout, it arrives as peace. You won't need to ask, was that God? Because the calm that fills you will answer louder than words ever could. That's how the Spirit speaks, when language fails through stillness that settles your storm. You'll notice it in little things. A thought that feels lighter than the rest. A verse that suddenly breathes again. A sunrise that feels personal, as if heaven painted it just for you. These are not coincidences. They're the gentle replies of a God who prefers whispers to thunder. So, cherish this silence made sacred. It's proof that your faith grew roots. The next time he speaks, you'll recognize the voice instantly because you learned to hear even when he said nothing. There's a light that returns to you when silence ends, a steady glow, not blazing yet, but alive again. You've walked through the quiet, faced the questions, and learned to recognize the voice of God even when it hid in stillness. Now, that same voice calls you to something deeper, to not just receive the light, but to reflect it. You see, the purpose of being refined is not to stay polished, it's to shine in dark places. Every lesson, every tear, every silent night you endured has been oil gathered for someone else's lamp. And now heaven gently whispers, pour it out. End 2. There's a story told of a potter who spent years perfecting one simple cup. He poured his heart into shaping it, firing it, glazing it, until it gleamed. But the beauty of the cup was never for display. It was made to hold water. It only fulfilled its purpose when it was poured into. That's you, chosen one. You were not created just to be whole. You were created to be useful, as Jesus himself declared in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6, verse 38. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. That is heaven's rhythm of exchange. What you release returns as abundance. When your hands open, heaven fills them again. If this message has breathed life into your spirit, press like as if lighting a candle on an unseen altar. Each like becomes a spark that reminds heaven you are still burning. When you share this word, imagine releasing a dove into the sky. It carries the message farther than your voice could ever travel, landing on hearts you may never meet. And if you feel led, subscribe. Think of it not as following a channel, but as joining a river that never dries. Each soul who joins becomes another drop that keeps the current of grace flowing forward. But there's one act that carries the weight of pure gratitude. If your heart feels stirred to give quietly, freely, you may offer a donation, not as payment, but as oil poured into the lamp. Every drop keeps the light steady for others still walking in the night. Picture it like this: a lighthouse standing at the edge of an endless sea. Storms rage, forests, and ships grope for direction. The lamp burns through the storm only because unseen hands keep adding oil. Your giving becomes that oil, your silent yes that keeps the beam cutting through the dark. Each act like share, subscribe, give is not about transaction, but transformation. You are building a chain of light, link by link, from your heart to another's horizon, and maybe somewhere tonight. Someone lost in confusion will find this very light because you chose to act. That's not obligation, that's legacy. You are not being asked, you are being invited to participate in beauty, to let gratitude take form, to make your thank you tangible. Give if you feel it. Share if your heart stirs. Like if you feel warmth. Subscribe if you wish to walk together. Donate if you wish to keep the lighthouse burning. All of it is voluntary. All of it is sacred. Because every time light passes through willing hands, heaven smiles and says, "The flame still lives." And when you choose to give whatever form that takes, heaven moves quietly around you. It doesn't announce your name, it weaves your gesture into the tapestry of grace. A thread of gold that no eye can see but eternity remembers. Every act of light becomes a stitch in the robe of mercy that covers generations. You may never know the full reach of what you've done. Somewhere, your faithfulness becomes a door for someone else's deliverance. Perhaps a voice will rise because yours once whispered. Perhaps a prayer will be answered because you decided to keep the flame alive. That's the secret of divine giving. It multiplies in places unseen. And in those moments when you wonder if it matters, heaven will remind you gently, every spark matters to the dark. The flame doesn't measure its size, it simply burns. You are that flame, carried in the hands of the Almighty, still shining, even when you don't notice. One day, you'll stand before God and see the harvest that grew from your unseen acts of kindness. The faces, the stories, the lives touched, all will stand as living evidence that your small yes changed eternity. So keep shining, keep pouring, keep giving in whichever way grace nudges you. Because in the kingdom of light, nothing offered in love is ever lost. The night always feels longest right before dawn. You've learned this truth over and over the moments when everything seems to fall silent. when strength feels thin and prayer feels empty, are often the very moments before heaven moves again. God does his deepest work in the dark because light would distract you from what he's forming. When he hides you, it isn't punishment, it's protection. There are seasons when you are meant to be unseen, because visibility can be dangerous before your roots are strong. A seed is never buried to die, it's buried to grow. The same soil that covers also nourishes. It's hard to understand that while you wait, you see others bloom, their lives bursting with color, while you remain underground. The temptation to compare creeps in, whispering, "Maybe I missed my moment." But in heaven's calendar, delay never means denial. Some fruit needs more sun, some needs more time. You are the latter, chosen for a harvest that requires depth before display. There was once a chosen one named Samir, known for his patience. For years he worked quietly, doing tasks no one noticed. People around him achieved much faster. He prayed, "Lord, when will it be my turn?" Heaven answered not with words, but with waiting. Seasons passed. Then, when the storms came, Samir was the only one still standing. The others who rose too soon had no roots deep enough to endure. That's when he understood the waiting was the strengthening, according to what is revealed in the book of Isaiah, chapter 30, verse 15. "In returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength." End quote. That verse isn't a comfort for passivity, it's a reminder that rest is divine strategy. The world moves fast, but heaven moves deep. The more you try to rush your own timing, the more you risk uprooting what God is still cultivating. Waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. It means listening longer, building quieter, and trusting deeper. It's allowing God to develop the invisible, the unseen parts of your soul that sustain what's coming. People notice outcomes, but heaven invests in foundations. Sometimes, the silence of waiting feels like being forgotten. You pray and nothing changes. You sow and see no fruit. But God hasn't forgotten you. He's finishing you. He's aligning your inner world with the weight of the promise you'll carry. A weak vessel cannot hold strong wine. So, he strengthens you by stretching you. Think of a tree growing in winter, above ground. It looks lifeless, no leaves, no movement. But beneath the frost, roots are pushing deeper, breaking rock, finding water. That's you. The surface may look still, but below, your roots are writing their testimony in the unseen. Waiting also purifies motives. When you cannot move forward, you start to ask why you want to. Ambition fades, leaving purpose behind. You stop striving to be known and start longing to be used. That's the refining fire of delay. It burns away the need for validation until all that remains is obedience. And when the time finally comes, you'll realize the waiting wasn't wasted. It carved humility into your spirit, compassion into your voice, endurance into your walk. You'll look back and see that every unanswered prayer was actually preparation disguised as silence. God's timing never arrives late, it arrives layered. Each moment you thought was empty was actually filled with lessons too subtle to see at the time. The space between promise and fulfillment isn't dead space, it's womb space. Life is forming there. You are in a holy holding pattern, not stuck, not stalled, being shaped. And when heaven finally says, "Now," You won't just step into purpose, you'll fit into it. The delay will make sense. The silence will turn into song. And the very thing you thought was loss will reveal itself as the structure that saved you. So, be still a little longer. Don't curse the ground you're buried in. It's the very soil that's feeding you. And when your season of hiddenness breaks, you'll rise not fragile, but fortified. The ones who waited well always rise strongest. And when you rise, it won't be as the same person who entered the waiting. You'll carry wisdom in your voice, gentleness in your strength, and peace in your pace. The world won't recognize how much you've changed, but heaven will. Waiting refines what applause could never build. So, step into your next sunrise with quiet confidence. You've been tempered, not delayed, planted, not forgotten. What God grows in the dark always glows brightest in the dawn. The season that once felt like silence will soon sound like fulfillment. There's a shift that happens after the waiting, a sacred tremor deep in your spirit. You can feel that something has changed, though nothing around you looks different yet. It's as if heaven has taken a quiet breath and exhaled favor your way. What once felt like delay now feels like preparation fulfilled. The fire that almost died in the dark begins to burn steady again. You stand now on holy ground, the beginning of restoration. Everything you lost, every tear, every silent night, none of it was wasted. God doesn't recycle pain. He redeems it. What once broke you will now build you. You've walked through the valley, but this time, you're not crawling, you're carrying light. When you endure long enough to be refined, heaven entrusts you with a new kind of strength, not loud, not proud, but enduring, the kind of strength that no longer fights to prove, only to protect. You don't need to explain your process anymore. The fruit will speak for you. According to what is written in the book of Joel, chapter 2, verse 25, I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten. End 12. That promise was never poetic, it was prophetic. God specializes in returning what was consumed, but He doesn't give it back in the same form. He upgrades it. You lost time, but He gives you wisdom. You lost people, but He sends purpose. You lost confidence, but He restores courage born from truth. There's a reason He waited this long. Quick blessings fade, refined blessings remain. The fire you endured didn't just change your situation, it changed you. You are not who you were when you entered the storm. The same waves that tried to drown you ended up teaching you to walk on water. Now comes the moment of declaration. Heaven is waiting for you to mark your return, not with noise, but with acknowledgement. The old season tried to silence you. This new one requires your sound. It's not about shouting in triumph. It's about whispering in alignment. I am restored. There was once a woman named Raina who lost everything: her job, her peace, her faith. For years, she carried ashes where joy used to be. But one night, she prayed a simple prayer. God, if you still see me, breathe again. She woke the next morning and felt something different, not a miracle, not a breakthrough, just hope. That was the first sign of restoration. Hope always comes before harvest, day by day. Her laughter returned. She started giving again, believing again, loving again. And before long, the life she thought was over became the testimony that lifted others. That's the beauty of restoration. It doesn't just fix you, It refills you. You might be standing where Raina once stood. You might not see full restoration yet. But the process has begun. Heaven never starts what it won't finish. The same God who began your story will write your ending with glory. Now it's your turn to mark this moment. Heaven often seals a season with a sign not for him, but for you. It's a gesture that says, I've heard, I've seen, I believe. And so, as a prophetic act of agreement, type 888 inches, the comments, not as ritual, but revelation. 8 is the number of new beginnings. 888 means beginning upon beginning, a cycle of endless renewal. When you write 888, you're declaring, my restoration has started, and I will not return to who I was. Let this not just be numbers on a screen. Let it be your covenant, your public whisper to heaven, I'm ready to begin again. Every soul that types it adds another flame to the fire of revival spreading across the chosen ones. God has not just restored your season, He's restored your sensitivity. You can feel Him again, hear Him again, trust Him again. What died in silence now sings in resurrection. Chosen one, this is your turning point. You are stepping out of ashes into oil, from mourning into movement. The pieces of you that were scattered have been gathered and reshaped into something holy. You are whole. You are new. You are proof that grace still resurrects the fallen. So breathe deeply and write it. 888. Heaven hears. Mercy records. And your new chapter begins now. And as you begin again, remember this truth. Restoration isn't about returning to what was. It's about becoming what always was meant to be. You are not walking back. You are walking forward, carrying light refined by loss and reborn in grace. Let the past rest. The new has come, and heaven is already writing your next sunrise. There's a new steadiness in your steps now. You've moved from surviving to standing, from breaking to building. What once shook you now strengthens you. That's what happens when restoration takes root. It doesn't just return what was lost. It equips you to guard what's been given. This is the season of separation, not isolation, but intentional distance, the kind that protects what is sacred. Every calling carries a cost, and one of the greatest is discernment, knowing what no longer fits the version of you that God is raising. Some connections, habits, and mindsets can't travel where you're going. They belong to the version of you that had to die for this one to live. Heaven speaks clearly through the words in Deuteronomy, chapter 30, verse 19. I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, choose life, that you and your descendants may live. Choosing life sometimes means choosing limits. It means walking away from conversations that drain your peace, from environments that starve your spirit. The world will call it distance, but heaven calls it discipline. You are no longer called to please the crowd. You are called to protect the covenant. It's strange how separation feels at first. It's quiet, sometimes lonely. You might wonder if you're doing something wrong, but solitude is not punishment, it's preparation. The silence that once felt empty now becomes your sanctuary. In that sacred stillness, you begin to hear God with new clarity. His voice no longer has to compete with noise. There's a story told of a blacksmith who forged a sword meant for the king. He shaped it in fire, cooled it in water, and set it aside to rest. But when he picked it up again, he noticed something. The steel had absorbed the pattern of the flame. That's what happens to you in this phase. The fire you've endured leaves its mark. You carry the pattern of heaven now. Invisible but indestructible. Separation is not about superiority, it's about stewardship. You've been entrusted with something fragile, yet powerful. Peace. Peace is the atmosphere where revelation breathes. That's why the enemy attacks it so violently. Every distraction that reappears, every temptation to return, is really an attempt to steal your peace. But you've learned. You can sense the difference now between opportunity and trap, between blessing and bait. What used to confuse you now feels clear. That clarity is the reward of the waiting. You no longer chase what looks right. You wait for what feels holy. This is where the armor of separation begins to form around you. It's not made of steel or pride, but of awareness. You start saying no faster, forgiving quicker, and loving without losing yourself. Boundaries become your new language of grace. They don't build walls, they build gates. And through those gates, only peace is allowed to enter. Chosen one. Understand this. Holiness doesn't mean you're unreachable. It means you're unavailable to what breaks you. It's not about hiding from the world. It's about shining without being dimmed by it. You are learning how to live in the world without belonging to it. There will still be moments when the old world calls, familiar faces, old habits, echoes of comfort. But you'll notice something different this time. The pull is weaker. What once tempted you now teaches you. You're not running from sin. You're simply uninterested. That's what transformation feels like. The people around you may not understand your quiet withdrawal. They may think you've changed, and they're right. You've outgrown chaos. You've discovered that peace is worth more than popularity, and purpose is worth more than approval. You are becoming the guardian of your own anointing. That doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop abandoning yourself to keep them. Your compassion now flows from wholeness, not emptiness. And that difference is what will sustain your calling. So, rest in this separation. Don't rush to fill it. God is drawing sacred boundaries around your destiny, ensuring that when you rise fully, nothing contaminates the oil you carry. When the time is right, He'll bring the right people back, not those who drain you, but those who match your healed frequency. Until then, walk in quiet authority. Let your solitude speak louder than your words. Because in this season, your peace is your warfare, and in guarding it, you're not losing connection, you're keeping communion. Every boundary you honor becomes a prayer in motion. Heaven reads your restraint as worship, so keep guarding your peace, for it is the crown that proves your growth. The same silence that once broke you now builds you into unshakable strength. There comes a moment when peace stops being something you chase and becomes something you carry. That's where you are now, not grasping for calm, but grounded in it. You've learned that the real measure of maturity isn't how loudly you can proclaim faith, but how quietly you can protect it. You walk differently now. The same storms that once terrified you can no longer move you. You've learned that peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of trust. It's the quiet conviction that no matter what shakes around you, the ground beneath you holds, because it's not your ground, it's His. It is written in the book of Philippians, chapter 4, verse 7, "And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That kind of peace cannot be learned through comfort. It's born in conflict. You only discover it when everything else fails to calm you. The fire didn't just purify your heart. It taught you how to rest while flames still surround you. There was once a man named Arel who worked as a craftsman near the sea. One night, a storm tore through the town and destroyed almost everything he owned. Yet the next morning, people found him rebuilding his workshop quietly, humming an old hymn. When asked how he could be so calm, he said, "The storm took what I made, not what made me." That's the secret you've learned too. The peace of God isn't fragile, it's unbreakable because it's not built on circumstances, but on covenant. This peace doesn't make life easier, it makes you unshakable. You can walk through the same winds that once bent you, and this time, you stand tall. The winds didn't stop, they just lost power over you. Peace also sharpens your vision. When you're no longer ruled by fear, you begin to see clearly again. You discern what truly matters. The noise fades, and direction becomes visible. What once felt confusing now feels simple, not because life changed, but because your spirit settled. You've become like a mountain lake after a storm. The surface is still again, but it reflects the sky more clearly than before. Clarity only comes when the water rests. That's why God allowed the shaking to still the chaos long enough for reflection to appear. Peace also gives birth to gratitude. Gratitude, not for what you gained, but for what survived. The things you once resented delay, disappointment, solitude now appear as blessings in disguise. They weren't detours, they were deliverance. Each one kept you from something that could have destroyed your soul. You begin to thank God for unanswered prayers, for closed doors, for silence that shielded you from ruin. That's the paradox of divine peace. It gives you joy in what you once feared. You start to see pain as passage, not punishment. The world won't understand this calm. They'll wonder why you don't panic when others do. But peace is not indifference, it's insight. You know that worry changes nothing, while worship changes everything. You've seen too much of God's faithfulness to doubt His timing now. In this phase, your peace becomes contagious. Without trying, you start influencing others. They come to you not because you shout the loudest, but because your stillness speaks. People sense safety near someone who carries heaven's quiet. You won't always notice it, but your presence is shifting rooms. You're becoming what Scripture calls a living epistle. Your peace preaches before your words do. That's the quiet authority of the chosen, to bring calm where others bring chaos. So, don't rush from this season. Stay steady in it. Let peace deepen until it becomes your instinct, not your effort. The next time uncertainty comes, you'll respond not with fear, but with familiarity. You've been here before, and you know who anchors you. This peace is not temporary, it's transferable. It will follow you into future battles, future callings, future nights that test your faith again. But now, you'll carry the proof of past deliverance like a scar turned into a song. And when you find others trembling the way you once did, you'll know how to steady them, not by instruction, but by example. You'll simply stand near, calm as still water, and your presence will remind them that peace is possible. You are no longer surviving storms. You've become the calm after them. And perhaps that's what heaven wanted all along, not perfection, but peace that endures. You are the proof that storms cannot erase what God establishes. Your calm is not weakness, it's worship in its purest form. So walk gently now, unafraid of thunder. The sky has learned your name, and even the winds honor your stillness. You have come a long way. Chosen one, the dust of battle still clings to your robe, yet your heart beats steady. You no longer walk with the trembling of the wounded, you move with the rhythm of the redeemed. Every scar has become a line of scripture written upon your skin. Heaven does not erase evidence of struggle, it transforms it into testimony. This is the moment of recommissioning. The light that once wavered now burns with purpose. What was broken has become a vessel strong enough to carry grace. You are not returning to who you were, you are ascending into who you were always meant to be. According to the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 1, present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. This is your spiritual worship. That is what you are doing now, offering your life, not as payment, but as participation. Everything you've endured was preparation for service. The world doesn't need another echo of fear. It needs living flames who remember the fire yet still choose love. And as this message reaches you, know that heaven never builds altars of stone anymore. It builds them in hearts. Every time you respond to what touches your spirit, you lay another brick upon that invisible altar. If these words have found a home inside you, press like as though lighting a lantern in the night. Its glow tells heaven, I am still burning. When you share, imagine releasing a firefly from your hands. It will travel beyond your reach, carrying light into rooms you will never enter, whispering hope to hearts you may never meet. If your spirit feels drawn to comment, write something simple, perhaps still burning or I remember the light. Think of your words as petals placed on sacred water. They float, they meet, they form rivers of prayer flowing unseen through this community. When you subscribe, see it as planting your roots in a garden of flame. Each seed grows differently, yet together they form a forest that sings when the wind of the Spirit passes through. And sometimes, love asks for something quieter. If you ever feel led to give, let it be as natural as exhaling. Picture pouring clear oil into a lamp that has guided you safely through storms. Your giving, no matter the form, becomes that oil silent, pure, steady, ensuring the flame never fades for those still walking behind you. This isn't demand, it's devotion. It's beauty, finding motion. When you give freely, when you speak light into comment threads, when you share and sow, you become part of heaven's living symphony of gratitude. Every gesture you make, like, share, comment, subscribe, or give, is not a transaction, but transformation. You're saying, the flame that found me will not stop here. And maybe, somewhere in the world tonight, someone will read these words because you dared to act. They will pause, feel the warmth, and whisper, I can breathe again. That is how light multiplies, not through command, but through compassion. So, let every action be worship in motion. Let your kindness become a note in the melody of redemption. Every quiet act, unseen yet sincere, becomes part of heaven's ongoing poem, written not with ink, but with fire. And when you act from love instead of duty, Heaven recognizes it instantly. There's a fragrance in selfless giving that rises higher than any song. It's the scent of worship without words, a melody only the angels can hear. Every time you choose to love freely, the universe records another echo of grace. You may never see the full circle of your gesture, but God will. He watches the unseen hands that choose kindness when no one is looking. He counts those moments as seeds of light, buried in time, destined to bloom in eternity. That's how the kingdom multiplies, through quiet, consistent compassion. Even your smallest movement of faith becomes part of heaven's choreography. A like turns into a spark. A share becomes a bridge. A kind comment turns into healing for someone else's hidden wound. And all of it weaves together into a vast network of grace, stretching farther than eyes can see. You've become a keeper of this rhythm now, a heart that responds, not reacts. Every gesture, every whispered yes, every thought of generosity keeps the current of mercy flowing across the world. You're not just part of the story, you're helping heaven write it. So walk in that awareness. Know that your every act of light, however small, becomes a line in the poem God continues to write through you. The further you walk on this path, the more you realize how sacred survival truly is. To be standing here after everything that tried to break you, that itself is a testimony. Heaven has written your endurance into eternity, and even the ground beneath you seems to know your story. Every step now carries history, healing, and quiet holiness. You've entered the season of legacy, the time when your scars start to teach others. What once hurt you now helps you guide. You've become a living archive of redemption, proof that grace is not theory but fact. Each breath you take echoes to those still trapped in their storm. You can make it too. End of town. The ancient words recorded in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 1, remind us, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run with perseverance the race set before us. You've joined that cloud now, not as an observer, but as one of the witnesses. Your endurance has become light for others, without even trying. Your existence tells a story stronger than any sermon, the story of a heart that refused to die in the dark. This is how heaven works through the chosen. God doesn't always send lightning or angels. Sometimes He sent survivors, people whose pain turned into wisdom, whose silence turned into prayer, whose journey became a map for those who wander. You are that map now. Legacy doesn't mean fame or recognition. It means impact that lingers after your words fade. It's what remains in people's spirits long after you've walked away. Sometimes it's a single sentence. Sometimes it's the way you stood when you could have fallen. Legacy is the invisible echo of faith. There was once a man named Levi who lived by the sea. He was quiet, ordinary, unnoticed by most. Yet every morning he walked the same path along the shore, collecting driftwood. He built small crosses and left them scattered where the waves could reach. People began to find them, travelers, fishermen, lost souls, and each one who picked up a cross found hope again. Levi never saw their faces, but his legacy washed over them like tide after tide. That's what your life is doing now. Every prayer you've prayed, every act of obedience you've given, is washing onto shores you may never see. Somewhere, someone you've never met will find courage because you decided to stay. Legacy doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It lives in the advice you gave that outlived the moment. It hides in the kindness you showed that no one else noticed. It breathes in every quiet, "I forgive you," that broke a generational curse. You've become a bridge between what was broken and what will be whole. The story that once felt like suffering has become structure. The cracks that once embarrassed you now let light leak through. Others will follow the glow coming from your wounds and find healing there. That's the mystery of divine legacy. It builds itself from fragments. The very things you thought disqualified you have become the foundations of your calling. You are not standing on failure, you are standing on formation. You don't have to try to create legacy. It happens naturally when your life remains aligned with purpose. Just live fully, love freely, and forgive quickly. The rest will become the ripple that carries forward long after you've stopped speaking. Every time you choose integrity over impulse, heaven records another chapter. Every moment you hold peace instead of bitterness, eternity turns another page. You're not just living, you're leaving light. And one day, when this journey is complete, you'll stand before the author of your story and see how every line connected the nights of silence, the tears of surrender, the choices of faith. You'll see faces you never knew, lives touched because you said yes when it cost you comfort. That's legacy. It's the sound of your obedience echoing beyond your lifetime. So, keep walking this race with grace. You've already won more than you realize. The reward isn't just in heaven, it's in every life illuminated because you decided not to give up. Your story will live on long after your voice grows quiet. Not as memory, but as momentum. The light that moves through you today will keep moving through others tomorrow, endlessly, beautifully, faithfully. And that's the promise of those who endure. Their flame never truly goes out. It travels, flickering from heart to heart. Long after they've stepped into eternity, your obedience has become immortal light. So, walk gently in the days ahead, knowing this truth. Legacy isn't left behind, it walks beside you forever. This is where the circle closes and opens all at once, the place where destiny meets devotion. You've walked through warning, waiting, wilderness, and wonder, and now you stand at the edge of eternity's mirror. The reflection staring back at you isn't who you were when you began, it's who heaven saw all along. The final lesson of the chosen isn't about victory or visibility, it's about vow. Every step, every tear, every surrender has led to this covenant moment, the decision to stand and stay faithful no matter the cost. Because faith that depends on reward isn't faith, it's negotiation. True faith keeps walking, even when all it has left is trust. You've seen how the journey shapes the soul. The valley carved humility. The storm revealed strength, and the silence taught you stillness. Each trial that once felt like cruelty has become clarity. Now, you understand that calling isn't comfort, it's consecration. To be chosen is to be set apart. To walk roads others avoid. To love even when unreciprocated. And to obey even when unseen. The ancient words in the book of Joshua, chapter 24, verse 15, proclaim, "Choose this day whom you will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." No, that is the anthem of the chosen, the quiet yet unshakable decision to belong completely to light. It's not shouted, it's lived. You live it when you forgive what doesn't apologize, when you bless what once broke you, when you stay pure in a world that celebrates compromise. There's a story told of an old watchmaker in a small village. Every morning before sunrise, he would wind the clocks of the town. When asked why he bothered, since everyone had their own watch, he smiled and said, "Because if I stop, the rhythm will fade." That's your calling now, to keep the rhythm of heaven alive in a world that forgets time. You are the quiet keeper of divine order, reminding people that eternity still ticks inside every moment. This is the eternal stand, the point where obedience stops being an act and becomes identity. You don't obey to earn love. You obey because you've become love. The fire inside you no longer needs validation to burn. It burns because it's true. And though the world may never fully understand your conviction, heaven does. Angels recognize that glow. It's the same fire they saw in prophets, martyrs, and dreamers who refused to bend. You are part of that lineage now. The light in you didn't start with you. It started with Him. And through you, it continues. Legacy turns to eternity here. You are no longer building for today. You are building for forever. Each prayer whispered, each boundary honored, each act of mercy extended becomes a stone in the house of glory that will outlive the earth itself. There will still be days when the weight feels heavy, when obedience feels lonely. But remember, you are never truly alone. The same God who walked with Moses through the sea, with Daniel in the den, with Esther in silence, walks with you still. The footprints beside yours are divine. You have become a voice of remembrance in a forgetting world. Every time you choose light over ease, you echo heaven's heartbeat through time. That is your purpose, to keep choosing, to keep standing, to keep burning. Soon, the trials that tested you will become the testimonies that strengthen others. The same path that once bled beneath your feet will become holy ground for those who follow. You are not leaving ruins behind. You are leaving a road. And when you finally look back on this life from heaven's shore, you'll see that none of it was wasted. Every unanswered prayer, every silent night, every trembling step, each one was a brushstroke in the portrait of grace. This is the eternal stand. Chosen one, to lie awake, to love fiercely, to guard your flame until the very end. For when heaven calls your name at last, you won't rise as one who merely survived. You will rise as light itself, crowned with every moment you refuse to give up. And when the final dawn arrives, you'll understand that every battle had purpose, every tear carried power, and every delay hid divine design. The path that once felt lonely will gleam behind you, a golden trail of obedience stretching into eternity. So, stand tall, flame bearer. The war is over, but your light remains. You are the proof that love never fails, that faith never ends, and that those who are truly chosen never stop shining. And now, as this journey draws to its close, take one last quiet breath. Let the words settle, not as echo, but as seed. What began as a message has become movement, something alive inside you that will keep unfolding long after this final line fades from sight. You are part of something luminous, something greater than speech, something eternal that travels through acts of love. If this message found you in a dark place, then let your heart answer it in its own way. Press like, as if lighting a small lantern at the edge of your path. Its glow says, "I am still here. Still believing. M. When you share, imagine opening your window to release a handful of golden dust into the wind. You'll never know where it lands. But somewhere, someone will breathe again because of it. That's how grace moves quiet. Invisible. Unstoppable. Leave a comment if you feel led. One word. One sentence. Anything. Your spirit whispers. Your words become pebbles dropped into water, rippling outward until they touch another heart that thought it was alone. If you subscribe, see it not as following a channel, but as joining a circle of fire that never goes out. Each new soul adds warmth to the collective light. Together, we become an unbroken chain of hope, stretching across continents and time zones. And if gratitude rises inside you, and you wish to give, let your donation be like adding oil to a lamp already burning bright. You're not paying for light, you're helping it reach farther into the world's forgotten corners. Do it freely, joyfully, beautifully, because every action born from love becomes a prayer answered in motion. You are the continuation of this message, the living proof that light never ends.